Hey guys, it's Vicky, and you're listening to the Tompkins Orchestra podcast.
And I'm Rithik, and today we're joined by David Michael Hyde, the composer of one of our winter concert pieces entitled Christmastide. It is a work that combines the strengths of choir and orchestra to express the spirit of Christmas. Mr. Hyde, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. This is going to be fun.
To begin with, we'd just like to ask you what inspired you to write Christmastide, which we're performing at our winter concert.
This was just a piece that I'm always kind of searching and exploring for new ways to express music. And I had never written a string orchestra and choir piece before. It seems to me that I'm in Christmas stuff. I don't know why that is. I love Christmas. I love the season. I love the holiday and what it means. It's certainly meaningful to me and my family, and it just seems like I just naturally gravitate towards Christmas for inspiration. I had been talking to a couple of my high school director friends about writing a Christmas piece, and this combination kind of came up and there was a lot of interest, and so we decided to do it.
When it comes to Christmastide, would you say it's the kind of piece that tells a story, or did you format it some other way?
The piece largely is written, well, it's expressed through a libretto that's actually a poem by Lahi Brown Allen. And the poem is in public domain now because I think it was written, written over 100 years ago. I used it for inspiration, but it being only 3 stanzas, it wasn't long enough. So I ended up having to contribute some lyrics to it. So I wrote a refrain and a bridge that kind of sums up what it's all about, and that is to really to stop in all the busyness of what the Christmas holidays and activities bring, and that is just not to forget what it's truly all about. And so I'm pretty proud of the end result, and the exciting part is that although I have a mock-up of the piece, that I used to do my composition with, I have not heard it played yet. So the exciting part is being able to hear it not only performed by live musicians that breathe life into it, which is super exciting and always very gratifying, but also, just to, really hear it for the first time. And I hope it's an inspiration to the students that get to play it. The piece is really my first foray into writing for choir. So I grew up singing in choir, a lot of us do. And me growing up as a musician and a singer, I was pretty familiar with what's possible for choir and what typical, high school talent there would be to play it. I would say that, or to sing it, I would say that this piece, though, is harmonically is probably a little bit challenging, but certainly from a rhythmic standpoint, it's very straight ahead. I would say it's like a grade 4 piece, but it's from a choir harmonic standpoint, it is probably a little bit challenging because there are some tight harmonies that are in it.
I'm actually also a part of the choir ensemble that'll be performing the piece. And it's been a lot of fun to sing. I'm an alto 1, and there are a lot of moving lines within that, which is more than what we usually get.
Yeah.
And I was wondering what the process was like to write a piece that includes choral music, because it is so interesting to see the way they overlay, and it's different to how strings are and when you're actually playing an instrument.
Well, even with my string orchestra pieces, I guess less so, the string parts in Christmastide are very much play a supportive role to the choir. The choir really is the star of the piece, as it should be, right? I mean, the number one thing is we need to, it's all about the message, right? But the way that I went about writing this piece was that I basically wrote the choir part first. And so I really focused on independent line writing so that all 4 parts, and including the divisive parts, have really something to contribute, not just providing a support role, but there's some independent part writing that allows them to really, break out. And not everybody is singing the same exact rhythm or the exact words at the same time, so that really does challenge the musicians to contribute in their own way and stand out. Um, and I really love that. So, altos tend to play a supporting role. They usually, when you're writing 3-part or 4-part harmony, altos usually are kind of like the filler at the end, when you're writing typical 4-part harmony. And I really strived for all 4 parts to have a unique contribution to the piece. So I'm glad that you see that.
It's a lot of fun to have something different to do, and it's probably one of my favorite pieces that I've actually sung throughout high school, because there's so much for us to be able to do, and there's so much complexity in all the piece, and so many different like kind of moods you go through as you travel through it.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think of there are some tight harmonies. Do you find that they're, challenging, or do you find that they're kind of fun and that you try to not listen too closely to the tenor part because you're a half step apart?
They're challenging in like a fun way, because
okay.
I like it when I have to really focus on what I'm singing, and like the whole choir is singing really loud in this piece for like certain parts, especially where those harmonies are like tying in, and I can still listen to the way it's all blending in. It's just so beautiful. So it's a lot of fun to play, like to sing in class.
That's awesome. Well, I think that the string arrangement is, like I said, very much takes a back seat, except for there is a middle section with a cello solo in it that is, it's during a very quiet part of the piece. And it really gets exciting at the end with the ostinato, engine of the strings as it's continuing to build into that last modulation. And by the way, if you listen to a lot of my catalog, I love a good modulation. So this was actually a lot of fun in kind of building that tension, rising tension into that last line of the choir that basically is the whole reason, for the season kind of thing. It was a lot of fun, and I'm glad to hear that you're enjoying it.
Yeah, I actually had the honor of playing that cello solo yesterday in rehearsal.
Oh, awesome. That's fantastic.
And I thought it was amazing. It was so luscious and full, and I think during that time all the other strings are muted and there's barely any voices from the choir, and hearing that cello solo singing out is just, it's amazing actually.
It's very exposed.
It's very exposed, but it's also a chance to like really express yourself, because it's such an emotional line as well.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah, I can't wait to hear it. It is one of those things when you're a composer, you write things and you don't know exactly, you have a pretty good idea, but you don't know exactly how it's going to sound until you actually hear it performed by real people. And then invariably it sounds a little bit different because you have a director who has an interpretation, you have musicians that have an interpretation that are breathing life into what they're playing. And there's maybe a little bit of a struggle, which is a good one, when you haven't heard a piece of music before, and then you're playing something that's never been performed before. You have no reference to go back on, right? So there's a little bit of tension there. How much emotion should I put into it? How much dynamics, what should I be feeling or thinking right here? When you play classical repertoire, you can always fall back on, the Chicago Symphony or the Berlin Philharmonic or somebody that has performed the piece before to get an interpretation and to kind of go, oh, I like the way that they did that. And they're performing a lot of music that, well, the composer is not around anymore. So they're relying on recordings in a large part as well. I mean, they do interpretation, don't get me wrong, but they lean heavily on those first recordings that were done in like the 20s or, a long time ago to kind of draw inspiration. And when the recording technology first came out, there was just kind of an explosion of orchestral works and operatic works and things like that to bring all that all those performances in people's living rooms. And that, in large part, is a kind of like the benchmark for a lot of performances that are done today with classical repertoire. But when you do something new, that's never been done before, you don't have anything to lean back on except maybe to tap the shoulder of the composer and say, now, what were you thinking when you wrote this? Or, what is it that you want us to feel beyond what the music says? I mean, you might see, like on that cello solo, you might see espressivo or something like that with some hairpins and whatnot. And maybe you're going to play that with rubato and be thinking about something, with feeling. But beyond that, it is challenging in a different kind of way, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And it makes me wonder also, for your perspective, how much do you think the art of music is dependent on the observer more so than the people that are performing it and you who composed it?
Well, I think that, I always strive to, for me personally, as a composer, the number one thing that I want to do is inspire young people. If you perform my music and it's putting motion pictures in your head, you're thinking of some film scene or maybe a painting or a photo. In other words, it's creating something in your mind, or you're identifying with it in some way and you find it beautiful. Why, that is the highest compliment for me as a composer. Some music is meant to be interpreted or be inspired, and it's open enough for people to think of whatever it is that brings to their mind, right? And some music is more programmatic. In other words, it has a particular mission in mind, like Christmas music does. But that is kind of like the number one thing. And then, of course, we want to bring joy to the patrons. All right. we want to engage the patrons, which could be, it could be family and friends, right? Anybody that paid a ticket or, is attending the performance. We want it to be a musical experience that they find engaging. So for me, I would say that both are very important, but they're a little bit different. And I would say if I had to prioritize, I would, for me personally, I would prioritize on inspiring musicians in their performance. And I do that primarily because that's part of my story. I had a junior high band director when I was growing up in Austin who was so inspirational to me and so many of my fellow band students that many of us are still on our musical journey today. And in fact, I would say that I'm on my musical journey now in large part because of Mr. Edward Zamora. And so your directors, when they pick new music and they challenge you to play new things or difficult things, hopefully it's my hope that you're finding inspiration to keep going in your musical journey. I mean, your musical journey, maybe you don't play cello for the rest of your life, but maybe you pick something else up. Maybe it's piano or whatever, and you play that. But what the world really needs is people to be, our musicians to keep going and to keep making music. It's so important.
Yeah, you mentioned that you started off in band and in choir as well. At what moment did you think that you wanted to start creating the music to become a composer?
That's a good question, because I think it kind of changed as I was growing up. I was one of these kids in junior high and high school that I got into electronic music and playing in rock bands and started, becoming a singer-songwriter at a very young age. My stuff wasn't any good, but I did it. And it was part of my musical journey, and I did a lot of learning. I was mentored by a handful of really great people, and I'm so grateful for that because they kept me going when I was younger to keep working on my craft. And then as I got into college, things kind of shifted, and I was leading worship at my church, and I was still songwriting and playing guitar and that sort of thing. And by then, when I was about halfway through college, I stopped playing my trombone. And to this day, I kind of regret that. I kind of wish that I had kept it and was able to pull it back out and pick it back up again. But it probably was when I was working in a recording studio in Houston part-time that I kind of got this itch of doing something more than just recording and songwriting and that sort of thing. And I wanted to do something that was kind of like, singer-songwriters are kind of a dime a dozen kind of thing. I mean, they're everywhere. Kind of got on this search for what I could do, and I kind of drew on the fact that I had all this electronic music experience, and I had been in band and orchestra growing up, and I started putting two and two together, and I thought I should get into writing film music because that's highly electronic, and a lot of the film music today is orchestral at least in texture. Maybe it's not a real orchestra that you hear, but it sounds kind of like one, right? Or it's a hybrid of electronic music and orchestral music. And so I got into writing as a composer for independent film, and I did that for a number of years. Then that was going pretty well. I received some awards, some accolades in doing that, and I was networking with a few film directors that had influence, and it was really becoming exciting. And then COVID hit.
Oh.
And you know how our lives completely changed when COVID hit.
Yeah.
The independent film industry just went belly up. Like, it went completely dark. There were no film festivals. There were no showings. The theaters were, it was just a mess, right? And nobody was making films anymore. And that's when I kind of decided, well, I'm just going to go back to my first love, and that is, ironically, writing for live performance, which you would think that's probably not a great choice during the COVID time, but it was a way that I just kind of felt like that was a natural progression of things. And so, yeah, when I do have some film experience, and I do have 5 or 6 years of writing for live performance, which isn't a whole lot, and that's why when you look at my catalog, it's not super deep, but I just really love it, and I'm still very informed by film and pictures and photographs, and it still influences the way I write today. So I'm just kind of embracing who I am, uniquely, and it's coming out in a kind of a different style than maybe some other composers that are out there today.
How do you feel specifically that film influences the way you compose your music?
A lot of times in film, especially in modern film today, it's somewhat minimalistic, right? I mean, a lot of film music is very subtle.
That's true.
And what's happening on film, the music is really not the music really doesn't make a statement for what's happening on the screen. If that's the way you write, I don't think that that's what film scoring is really about. What I think film scoring is about is making more of an editorial statement about what's on the screen. It's kind of like, imagine a black and white photo, and it's, you're inside of a house, and it's a spiraling staircase, and it's dark, right? And earlier in the film, the villain makes his appearance, and, the villain has a theme, right? And it's a theme because when the villain is there, the theme is there, But in this dark scene with the spiraling staircase, there's a man that's coming down the stairs, and all he has is a candle, the electricity's out or whatever, and he can't see anything. But you hear in the film score a subtle nod of the villain's cue or the theme or motif. And what do you think? What is the viewer of the film thinking? Well, he's thinking that he's about to be killed by the villain, or the villain's going to come out from behind the curtain, or something bad's about to happen, right? And so film music, I think, it has a way of manipulating people, but it often has something more editorial or deeper to say about what's on the film than what the film is actually showing on the screen. And there's a certain depth to good film music that, like, it will stand on its own if it's done well. And I'm not talking about the subtle electronic music that's out there sometimes, but I'm talking more. Alex Silvestri is a great example. John Williams is a great example of people that are putting out film music that, John Williams, he's like, I don't know what he is. He's like 92 or something. And I mean, his career is amazing, but they do such a great job of writing music that not only makes, it's like two art forms that are kind of put together, picture and music put together to create something that's truly special. But then the music also stands alone. So I think that that's what makes good film music. I think that it tends to be more thematic. There tends to be, at least in the film music that I'm thinking of, the, great long form melodies. There tends to be great action sequences that are, sometimes aleatoric or not tonal, that really do a great job at communicating a feeling or stress or tension, and you don't have to watch the film to be able to feel that, right? I also think that there is a palette, if you will, of how music is constructed. It's just different than classical repertoire, and it tends to kind of want to attach itself to our feelings more so than maybe some classical repertoire does. It's very hard for me to put my finger on it exactly. I just would say that, when I write music, it tends to be something that I have something cinematic in mind. Sometimes it's what I'm thinking in my head, and I'm thinking of other art forms that I get inspired of when I'm writing those things. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but it's a great question.
You talked a lot about film scores. Is there a particular film that you look up to that you think, wow, that's how a film score should be done?
That's it. That's
Well,
the one.
there are so many. Oh gosh. I hate to say this because it's like what every composer says that around my age, but in 1977, I went and saw film Star Wars, and I was 12. I think that was the first. Like, it affected me so much. I don't even know if I can communicate. It was the first film as a 12-year-old that I think I ever saw that was like that kind of drama and that kind of, outer space sci-fi kind of thing. Like, I'd never seen anything like that. I think the film that I saw before that was The Rescuers, which is some, animated Walt Disney film. And then I jumped to Star Wars. So, like, it blew my mind, y'all. And so that's always been super influential. And it's not just the themes. I mean, the themes are great, right?
Yeah.
It goes without being said, but I love the way that John Williams and his orchestrator, I love the way that I love the orchestration and how deep it is and how they use combinations of instruments to create certain sounds. And I like to study scores, and I love kind of uncovering or discovering those combinations that create that uniqueness that sounds the way that it does. It's not just merely just strings or just woodwinds or just brass playing and block writing. No, it's like combinations of, like oboe and trumpet, or, cello and bassoon. Those are the no-brainers. But I just love that.
I have a bit of an odd question. If you were to put Christmastide in a Christmas movie, what kind of movie do you think it would be?
That's a really good one. You're going to have to edit out a bunch of blank time because I think it would be like a dramatic version of a Christmas Carol, maybe something that kind of tells the story of changing somebody's heart and truly understanding what Christmas is all about and being grateful for not only the season but what Christmas truly means for us. I think that would, I think Christmas Carol does that kind of in a, Charles Dickens did that in his own way, and I wouldn't say that this measures up to that at all. But I think the message is the same. I just would go about, it would be more of a Hallmark version.
I was actually also when I was asking that question, I realized that in my head the answer was A Christmas Carol. And especially,
really?
There's like this moment in like the middle of the piece where it gets really intense really fast, and it feels like that's where like, I think that's the part that to me speaks Christmas Carol, where it's like the character is learning the lesson.
Yeah, I think I just, when I think of Christmas Carol, I tend to only think of the Bill Murray version now, so I can't ever take it seriously anymore. But yeah, I think if there was kind of like a a more heartwarming version that I don't know, all I can think of is a Hallmark version that sounds like cheese, but yeah, I think that's how I would think of it.
I always think of the Muppets Christmas Carol specifically.
Oh,
I think
it's been a while.
That's a good
We
one.
were just, my family was just talking about the Muppet movie and thinking that we just needed to pull that out because it's been a long time since we've seen that.
You mentioned that this is the first time you're hearing this piece played out live. What are your expectations sort of coming into this? I mean, you've never heard it live. All you know is what it looks like on the page and probably some sort of way of listening to it, which is also another question that I would like you to answer. Your creative process. I mean, do you listen to it with the piano because that's something we've heard before, or maybe a MIDI file, or whatever it might be? And how do you think that version will vary from what you're gonna hear from us and from Clements High School, who are also playing it when we eventually play the premiere?
Yeah, so I right off the bat, I know that everybody's performance is going to be a little bit different. Like I know there's a high school that's going to perform this piece with just a small vocal ensemble and a full string orchestra. So I know that's going to sound different. I know that Mr. Porter is we've been in conversations about ways that he's kind of thinking that he wants to express the music in terms of tempo, and we've even talked about how some of the parts are divided in the string sections from a disease standpoint. And so I know that his performance is going to sound different than somebody else's, and it's like I'm totally okay with that. I just think it's just really wonderful because what people are doing is they're taking what's on paper and they're just breathing life into it. It's their their expression. It becomes their expression and not just something that I've expressed onto paper. And so I'm going to try to make as many of these performances as I can. They're kind of all clumped together around Christmas time, right? So, it might be a little bit difficult to make them all because there are some that are going to be happening in the Dallas area as well. But I do expect there to be variation, and that's okay. I think that's what's great about new music. I think the heart of what's I've been kind of since this is a consortium, and we can talk about what a consortium is, but it's just a network of directors that come together to commission a new music work. Those directors are getting the rights to premiere the piece, right? And it's my hope that maybe I can do a little bit of networking and have a conversation with every director so they can ask questions and I can have an opportunity to meet the students and kind of express what I think Christmastide is about, and then maybe even hear their performance before the premiere to kind of say, hey, can we draw this out? Can we slow this down? Could we make this more rubato or quieter here? Or can we make this more aggressive and strong? Because this is what I was thinking. I hope to be able to have those kinds of conversations. But in the end, I fully expect each ensemble to perform it in their own way, and they're all going to be wonderful because they're going to be expressions based upon those performers and that conductor. Backing up and talking about how I hear the music when I'm writing it, and even when I'm done, but I haven't heard a performance of it, how do I know what it sounds like? I a lot of the time I write what I hear in my head before I ever. I don't do a lot of improvisation on the keyboard or on the piano. I start with melody. Almost always start with melody unless I'm writing action music. And so melody is king. And a lot of times I will try to think of, even if it's not a choir piece, I will try to think of something singable. Because singable means probably something that is going to be memorable. So I just go into, once I come up with an idea or a nugget of an idea, I immediately try to either speak it or sing it in my phone if I'm out and about somewhere, or I sit down in my studio, and I use Dorico. I'm an early adopter of Dorico, and I start writing things out. But generally, I start with piano only because for me, if I try to write with all the instruments, for a symphony piece, if I try to write with all of the orchestral instruments in mind when I'm laying down the foundational work of the composition, if I try to think of every single instrument, I think my writing is weaker. I think my writing is better when I'm not bogged down in orchestration. I am first and foremost thinking about composition, and my writing is much better looking at the work from a composition standpoint than jumping and trying to do orchestration at the same time. So I do this in phases, right, or layers. And so I start with like 4 piano rolls on my Dorico, and so I'll have high, medium, and low voices on different staffs. And I will look across, a lot of times I'm looking vertically, looking at harmonic decisions. This is where, Vicky, where I might be making decisions about passing tones and voice independence and things like that you mentioned earlier in our talk, to make things more interesting. But it's not until I feel like the composition is substantially complete that I will then think about orchestration. And, for this piece, for Christmastide, I knew it was going to be for choir and string orchestra. And so I started with choir first and just made sure that the choir part was solid, and then wrote strings to support that and provide textural interest and, support for what the choir was singing. So when it comes to hearing what a piece sounds like before it's performed, a lot of times I lean on Dorico for that. There is a way that you can play back using virtual instruments, and I have a very deep library of virtual instruments that are actually pretty decent that I used when I was writing for film. And so I use a combination of Dorico and those sample libraries to create a mock-up that models, I think, 80 to 90% of what the dynamic equivalence of every instrument will be when it's performed live, using the dynamics that are marked in the score. So I have a pretty good idea, but it's really not until you hear it performed that you kind of go, they really brought out that part, or wow, that is so expressive and more beautiful than I could have imagined. And that, I'm not just saying that has happened. That happened last Christmas for one of the pieces that that was co-premiered last year called Of Dust and Eternal. There was a performance that was done at a high school that they played the socks off of that piece, and it was so amazing and expressive, and they took their time, and like they they could have just, like, it was a kind of a grade 3.5 or grade 4 piece. They could have just played through it, and that would have been it, and it'd been fine. But they took it and they said, you know what, this piece is, from a performance standpoint, it's easy, but we're going to make it more challenging by pushing as much expression in the piece as they could. And they made it like, I don't know, they made it like adagio for strings, man. It was awesome. It was really beautiful.
As a composer who's done so much and was in band and choir and orchestra in junior high and high school, how do you think other students can start their musical journeys with composition?
I'll just speak a little bit about how I got started. When I was in junior high, I had a cousin that played trumpet. I had kind of moved from, at that time, I wasn't playing trumpet anymore. I was playing euphonium and about to transition to trombone. And my brother played alto saxophone. And my first composition was an arrangement of Christmas carols that I wrote for the three of us to play in front of my family. And I was in 8th grade. And I remember it was like 2 days before Christmas Eve. My cousin came over with her trumpet, and my brother and we sat down to read the piece for the first time. It was an absolute train wreck, because I failed to take into consideration the fact that there are concert keys for these instruments, and you don't have to really worry about that in the string orchestra world too much, but it's in wind instruments. It's like, why in the world, the alto sax is in concert of E flat, and I've got a B flat instrument, and it's just crazy. And so it was an absolute, and I had like 2 days to basically retranscribe the entire piece with taking in consideration the different key signatures, and it was a it was a great lesson, but it was super stressful. And in the end, it came out just fine. But I would just say, just start writing what you hear in your head. If you don't hear anything in your head, then sit down at a piano or your instrument and kind of experiment in modal scales, improvise in modal scales to express yourself. Modal scales are great because they're very approachable, and every modal scale communicates a different feeling. They're really great. So if you're in a particular mood and you want to, write something, a melody of a particular mood, you can do that using the appropriate mode. And so improvise in those modes, write it down, try to create some accompaniment to go with it. To me, that's a great place to start. I started as a singer-songwriter, so I was doing writing lyrics and writing melodies and chord progressions and things like that. Pretty simple stuff, but that's a great place to start. And I think country music, maybe not today's country music, but country music, the 80s and 90s, great music to kind of learn chord progressions, because a lot of pop music is pretty simple chord progressions too. But that's a great place to kind of just, why does that music sound the way that it does? Try to play what you're actually hearing. I continue to be amazed when I listen to like a haunting melody. I listen to the harmonic structure underneath. It's super simple, and I go, that just sounds amazing to me. Why does it sound that way? Why does it sound so amazing? And so I think it's good to ask those questions and then kind of go back and sit down at a piano and see if you can kind of break it apart and figure out why it sounds the way that it does, even though it's something that is simple. It's just strikingly beautiful, and I love solving those kinds of puzzles. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that is I think for somebody that's interested in writing music and wants to explore it, they don't necessarily have to find a trio of relatives to play Christmas music. You can just Wikipedia modes of scales and just pick one and improvise. In the left hand, just play the root of that scale, and in the right hand, just play in that scale, write a melody with it, and that's a great place to start because it's naturally for me. It's even today, if I'm feeling dry and uninspired, sometimes I go to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good starting point. We've got some student composers here, and I think we might have more after that conversation.
We have a shocking amount of student composers.
We do.
Hey, do y'all have a composer club there? You guys meet on a regular basis, or is it
These are all
everybody's kind of on their own?
really
Yeah.
good ideas, actually.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think it's incredible because they all started on their own at different times, just
Yeah.
on the whim. They just had the desire to start composing, and they did.
It's always
Yeah.
fun
Eh,
to talk about and talk to different composers like you and hear about how you guys got started. It's always like different, but also the same.
Yeah. Well, see, I find that inspiring too. I mean, I love to hear the story of, especially, composers that are just getting their start. I love to hear what their origin story is too, because that inspires me. Um, and sometimes it's just somebody that has it seems to be driven to express themselves in a new and fresh way, but they don't exactly know where to start. I think composing music is a great way to express yourself. We all have hard days, and or hard weeks, or whatever, and sometimes we go through kind of down times, but music is always something that we can lean on and express ourselves through, and it's like the one constant. It's a friend, and it's my hope that as whether you're in high school or you're in college, that just because you get out of school, that you've got enough transformative experiences from your time in high school that you just know in your heart that your instrument is always going to be with you, and you're always going to find ways to express yourself through your instrument. I just think that's what I hope for everybody.
As we wrap up our conversation, we were wondering if you had any last piece of advice for our listeners.
Hmm. I would say, I think I've kind of already said this, but I would just say keep going. I think that this world, we with the political upheaval and all the difficult and hard conversations, and the world is kind of a mess, everywhere we turn. And my hope is that as many musicians as possible will stay and develop their craft and keep going, because the world really needs artists to find a way to express love and forgiveness and acceptance, and find a way to say things in music that can't be said in words. And the world needs that. And so I would just say keep going. Your music path, or as you get older, it may change. It may look quite different from your origin story, like mine. But I just hope that everyone will not give up on it, because it's really what the world needs.
Wow. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Hyde. It's been an honor, actually, because we've talked to a lot of composers, especially last year during this time of the year. And I thought that maybe I'd learn a little bit of new things here. And no, I learned a lot of new things.
Yeah.
It seemed like every time you opened your mouth, I learned something new. And
It's also
I'm,
fun to hear a little bit more about the choral side of composition, because we very rarely get to sing a piece while the orchestra, our amazing orchestra, performs it alongside us. And it's fun to get to know what it's like to actually write those like lines. I've always wondered.
Well, this has been a lot of fun for me. I hope that I get a chance to maybe connect with the orchestra and the choir before you guys have your performance that's coming up, I think the first week of December, right?
That is correct, yeah.
Yeah, so I think you have one performance on Friday the 5th of December.
I think
And
it's the
then
4th or the 5th, yeah.
Yeah,
okay, yeah, and you have one like the next week as well
I believe
on the 11th.
the choral one is the 12th. We could be off on our days.
I think
Okay,
it's the 4th and the 12th, unless I'm mistaken.
okay. Well, in any case, yeah, I hope that we get a chance to connect in person. Even if it's over a Zoom call or something like that, just to say hi to everybody. And I love when you do a short Q&A with 90 students or whatever it is, it's you never know what's going to happen, and that can be kind of fun. So I hope I get a chance to connect with y'all. I'm for sure going to try to make your performance. Even if that doesn't happen, I hope to make it, and I wish you guys the very best.